Hi, everyone. Welcome to All Out Coach. I'm going live today to talk about why companies create purpose, why they follow a just cause. Yes, it's in vogue now. We talk a lot about being socially conscious, having consciousness in our business. But having a just cause doesn't mean that you have to be a charity. You can still make profit, provide a service to your customers, and believe in a purpose that's larger than yourself and still be relevant and still relate your activities and your business to growth. So I want to use one example and just summarize and really share with you a story that Simon Sinek speaks about in his book, The Infinite Game. The Infinite Game, he signed the book for me, Tim at All Out Coach, when I had a very brief discussion at the World Business Forum about a year ago, last year. And what I want to talk about is one visionary in the 1900s that I think really represents what purpose and what infinity and an infinite mindset really means. His name was Nikolai Vavilov. He lived in Russia, and he grew up in the 1900s. He grew up during a time when there was a lot of famine. There were a number of different periods of famine and poverty in the country. And 25 years before Leningrad, as it was then called, St. Petersburg, was sacked and was under siege by the Nazi Germans in 1941, he had developed a passion for botany. He was a botanist. He had traveled around the world, being in academia. He had collected many different seeds and food crops because he was fascinated with the idea that every family and every human being should have an opportunity to feed themselves so that our human species would still be around regardless of what natural disasters were to come in the future. And so he had this particular vision. And he studied for many years, he taught, and then he formed his own team of scientists who followed his vision, and they created a bank of seeds that were actually hidden in the center of the city, the beautiful city of St. Petersburg, during this siege. And even when they were questioned and interrogated by the Nazi Germans, his scientists did not reveal any secrets or the location of this food bank. And they continued to actually plant the crops that were close to the front lines during that wartime period, during that siege, even to their detriment, where they continued to be hungry themselves, but they continued to create these seeds. Planting a seed for the next generation is a critical reason and purpose for why all of his followers did what they did. Nikolai Vavilov was not the only one. And even though he actually, unfortunately, passed away being hungry in jail after being accused of and charged with being a spy by Stalin in Russia, Nikolai Vavilov left an important purpose that lived beyond his time. The goal is not to live forever, but the goal is to create something that will. And so that is, I think, an important reason for why certain people are driven by passion. Now, how do you translate that into a business that works, that's functional, that creates profit, and that continues to grow and provide services to others? And there are a number of different stories that Simon Sinek shares, and probably many of you who are listening to this and and I as well have experienced. We've seen how Apple has transformed itself, its culture, and the purpose. Apple really didn't compete with anyone else, whereas Microsoft and its legacy was shaken at some point, right? It decreased in its relevance in our modern world, in our popular mainstream world. And Steve Ballmer, who is the CEO of Microsoft, in every quarterly press release or quarterly statement that he made to the public, he boasted about the number of sales and how Microsoft was doing in relation to others. So he kept competing against others, which is what Simon Sinek reminds us. In fact, in his very last press conference after a quarterly release of results, he mentioned that, yes, in the last 5 years, Apple had better sales, stronger sales than we did. Well, in over the last 13 years, however, Microsoft has still outperformed Apple. So he kept continuing to compete against others rather than allow his organization to grow with unbound potential. Whereas Apple had a different mission and vision. And so Nikolai Vavilov's vision stood throughout the years. And even today, there are over 1,000, over 2,000 different food banks throughout the entire world, throughout 100 countries that have many of these thousands of food crops and seeds in order to assure that the human species will continue to live throughout pandemics, throughout natural disasters, and so forth and so on. The largest one of them is in Norway, the Svalbard Seed Bank, if you would like to look it up. But when we talk about companies, they all have a mission statement and a vision statement. And some really do not inspire others to have a vision or to grow, right? And we know, those of us who've worked in many different large companies or had our own, when we drafted our own mission statements, see, they don't always sound like that Declaration of Independence and American founders who had a bigger vision than themselves over 240 years ago, that all men are created equal. The 556 of them who signed that Declaration of Independence and who inspired politicians, statesmen, writers, authors, countrymen, and citizens for generations to come to the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so a statement such as one in which a company lists on their website or in their presentations to their employees that we are committed to bringing the best high quality products and saving consumers a lot of money available to everyone in the United States. What kind of inspiration does that really trigger? Vizio is one such company, for example, that Simon Sinek speaks about. He provides many different press releases and statements from executives who start with what they feel is most important and then end with something that may provide some kind of service to others. Whereas others that transform their companies are able to start and lead with that cause, that just cause first, before talking about results as well. And so he has 5 different qualities that he outlines in his book that I just want to share with you. And for that, I will bring my whiteboard right here. Okay. First of all, a just cause has to be for something, not against it. Remember, Nikolai Vavilov, when he wanted to build this food bank, he wanted to provide food for every family for generations to come. He didn't think about one quarter to the next, like Jack Welch, for example, General Electric, who, when he was asked the question, what is your long-term vision or long-term goals? He responded that long-term goals are simply many short-term goals taken together. And you could argue that that's true because you need incremental improvement in everything. But we know that GM and Jack Welch had a performance mindset that was limited, that was bound, that had an upper bound. It wasn't growth oriented, where he didn't have a vision for generations to come. It was a quarter over quarter mindset rather than a vision, an infinite vision. Companies, as a result, even though they're becoming more innovative, they're not surviving themselves. Where in 1950s or 1960s, an average company lasted for about for decades, for even up to 50 years. Now that average lifespan has cut down to 20. So for something, meaning it has to grow, increase the food supply to everyone, all human beings, not to be against poverty. Because when you're against poverty, you are also limited on that lower extreme, on the bottom. There's only so much you can do, and then you're done. It's not to be against poverty, be open access. People have to have a sense of belonging. Not everyone is going to have the right skills. So Nikolai Vavilov, when he enlisted his scientists, they had relevant skills, but his vision was open to everyone. So if you are interested in a vision, then you have to demonstrate your efforts, your time, and your presence, even if you don't have the talents that are relevant to it. But you will be given a task, you will be given a reason, and also an activity in which you can test yourself, stretch yourself, but still contribute to a cause. So you don't have to necessarily be an expert in a cause in order to contribute to it. For others, that's key. And we're familiar with Simon Sinek's servant leadership. And I don't like to use that term, servant leadership, just because of the many different ways it may be interpreted by many people. A servant that still serves somebody higher up, meaning that there is a higher authority. No, we're all human beings, and we need to recognize that we have to collaborate. We're a social species, even if we are undergoing social isolation right now. That means that we are happiest when we do something for others, or when we have someone else by our side through our trials and our tribulations. That's a simple formula here at All Out Coach that I know many of you may argue against and say, look, I live alone and I'm happy. That's happiness for me. I don't need anyone else. We're in an individualistic society in the United States, but we're realizing that what's happening in other countries is also now happening here. We're living in a globalization. And I've met too many very wealthy and very successful individuals who are not happy because of the kind of person or lack thereof that they have by their side. You just need one person. So others. You have to create this vision, not just for yourself, but for others. I work in the pharmaceutical industry for about 16 years in the medical division, and I'm dedicating the rest of my career to growing and transforming the medical function in our industry. But the big purpose, big just cause that I want to have some part in is to help advance medicine so much that people will live forever in the next generations to come. That's another controversial statement. I want my children, our children, other people's children to live longer and even forever, meaning that is an unattainable goal, or so we think, or so we think right now. But it needs to be idealistic. It needs to be a stretch goal, similar to what Nikolai Vavilov had on something that life as we know it is beautiful, it's wonderful, and we have to love life in order to do and focus on those activities that will help the next generations and spend more time on those rather than on the pettiness and on everything else. So medicine, since I'm in the business of medicine, I want medicine to continue to advance so far that people will live much longer and even forever, starting with the next generation. Resilient as well. I skipped over resilient. Resilient means that it has to withstand time. Garmin had GPS and navigators available for many years, but they could have been agile and could have thought about generations to come, as Simon Sinek reminds us in his book. And they could have thought about repurposing the navigation system for mobile phones, for computers, that people don't have to have a standalone product in their cars, for example, or elsewhere, in order to guide them somewhere. Just like Victorinox did. Victorinox used to be a knife company, a Swiss Army knife company. It was the most popular corporate gift until 2001, when in 9/11, the company didn't just agile, it pivoted, and what it did was it went and it started to make Victorinox watches that are now available and now popular. The company's still around. Garmin, I'm not sure if the company's still around, but it's no longer relevant. And so it has to be for something, inclusive, for others. You have to have others in mind, as on their website. You have to move people to think generations ahead. If you want your company and your business to be here and to be relevant for generations ahead. Because if you're thinking about creating an exit strategy, an enter and exit strategy, as many startup companies do that I've seen before, then you gamble and you run the risk of creating many different companies, and you can't create purpose and a legacy for yourself as an individual, for others in your organization or in your network. Because your leadership, ultimately, the leadership equation at All Out Coach is the net number of people you help minus those you harm. And that's a relative number. It's not an absolute number, because leadership is relative. It's not absolute. So remember some of these points and create a mission statement, a vision statement, or a just cause for which your employee will to support and will be able to stand up for and could withstand any challenges, any pandemics that are to come. Let me know what you guys think. But I wanted to share this story and some of these